Primary support for Earthlings 2.0 comes from Technica Communications, an award-winning PR firm amplifying breakthrough technologies of the future. Additional support comes from Greenlane, who is building the open access highway of the future with safe, reliable, and scalable charging infrastructure for medium and heavy-duty zero-emission vehicles.
So not a lot of people know, but first flight of an airplane was here in the United States in 1903. First autopilot system inside the airplane was 1913. So we've been flying with autonomous or autopilot-like systems for over 120 odd some years now.
Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome back to Earthlings 2.0, the show where we imagine how we could be better versions of ourselves and build a collective future we actually want to live in. Today, we're continuing to explore the future of aviation. It's changing a lot. Often people will say that we're in a new golden age of aviation. But what does that really mean? It means a lot of things. And our guest today is really focused on something that's going to dramatically change how we think about aviation. They're developing a new aircraft design with future autonomous capabilities that could also be compatible with sustainable aviation fuels almost right away, and then, be future-proof for hydrogen propulsion in the future. So if you're curious to explore this concept of more sustainable aviation, go deep down into our archives to find episode 12. So you're going to have to scroll a little bit, and you will find a show that interviews the editor of Aviation Week and the CEO of Zero Avia, and talks a lot about electric and hydrogen aviation and what we could expect and what do we think is realistic in the short term. And what piqued my interest in today's guest is that they're tackling multiple engineering challenges at once. And if they're successful, their airplanes could radically transform how we move Earthlings and goods across our blue-green space flower. So understanding that air freight might be one of the first applications of these new aircraft designs, this company is poised to bring us air cargo solutions by the end of the decade. But before we dive in, I'm your host, Lisa Ann Pinkerton. I'm the founder and CEO of the award-winning PR technology firm Technica Communications and the founder of Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability. Before building those organizations, I was an environmental science and tech reporter for NPR and PBS. And if this is your first or 50th episode, thank you so much for tuning in. We're really excited to have you. And if you're a returning listener, thank you so much for continuing to enjoy the show. It's our pleasure to bring you these stories. This is our creative outlet over here at Earthlings. And so we're really excited that you continue to enjoy the shows. And if this is your first episode, welcome. We have a lot of different topics that you can explore. Aviation is one of them, aerospace, the commercialization of space, also things like food waste and the plastics crisis, and a lot of stuff around what might happen if we fail to keep the climate at 1.5 C. So feel free to scroll around in our archives and find what interests you. If you would like to get more involved in our community, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can be a silent partner, if you will, by just sharing the show with a friend of yours. Next time you're talking podcasts or mentioning a topic that you heard from the show, feel free to let your friend know how you learned about that information. And better yet, text them the podcast link, and then they'll have that in their hand, and they might not forget, and they might remember to listen to it. That's the single best way that you can help us grow our community. And I know many of you are doing that because every week we get more and more and more listeners. So it's working. Thank you. And if you haven't yet, please join our newsletter. We're going to give you a monthly digest of what's happening on the show, so you won't get a lot of emails from us. You can click on the link in the show notes for that. Also, if you're feeling informationally generous, you can take our survey and tell us how you as a listener are receiving the show and what you'd like to see in future episodes. And thank you to Resource Labs for having us on the network. Today's Tech Spotlight is with Nautilus. That is a California-based startup that is building a new generation of airframes with a look towards autonomous capabilities. Their blended wing design could open up interior layout options for a variety of uses, as well as improve fuel efficiency, reduce costs, and also cut emissions by up to 50% compared to currently available technology. So joining us today is Aleksey Matyushev, and he is the co-founder and CEO of Nautilus. He has 15 years of experience in aerospace engineering and systems design. He's worked on 7 aircraft programs. He has a tremendous amount of experience in this field, and he's leading Nautilus from tiny idea in the back of his mind to a full-fledged company with prototypes, partnerships, and on track to deliver by the end of the decade. So, Aleksey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start at the beginning. The blended wing body. Can you explain what this design is for folks who might not be familiar with it?
Absolutely. So the blended wing body, if you haven't seen a picture, looks very much like a flying wing, but with a bigger belly, almost like a pregnant flying wing aircraft. And the idea behind it is to reduce drag specifically and open up more volume within the configuration. It was studied by NASA and Boeing in the late 1990s, early 2000s. For a variety of reasons, it wasn't the right time to place it, but we believe we have the key insights and market opportunity right now to capitalize on it.
If you're watching the YouTube show, you'll see what this looks like. If you're listening, it's almost like the plane looks more like a triangle because you don't have the wings sticking out separately from the body of the aircraft. It's all kind of, like you said, blended together into one shape. Why does this improve efficiency and reduce drag?
So the big idea behind the blended wing body design was to move away from the traditional tube and wing, specifically in numbers. Traditional Boeing or Airbus airplanes, 90% of the lifts comes from the wing and about 10% from the fuselage. 90% of the drag comes from the fuselage and 10% of the wing. In a blended wing body design, it's actually a 50 and 50%. So the fuselage actually behaves as a separate wing in the configuration, which reduces drag, increases lift, and overall efficiency of the airplane.
Okay, and is this blended wing design something that's brand new or has it been around for a while?
It's been talked about in aviation circles for possibly now 30 years. The original concept originated within McDonnell Douglas in Long Beach, California. For a variety of political reasons, it was never pursued. But one of the challenges surrounding it was really creating the right market adaptation for it or market entry point to make it actually commercially viable because in many ways it has been seen as a technological risk.
Why was it seen as a risk? Just because it was different than the fuselage and the separate wing design and people didn't want to invest in it, or was there something else?
I think public perception had something to do with it. But specifically, the concept originated in these big companies, the Boeings and the McDonnell Douglases of the world. And, in their opinion, of course, a new airplane program is multi-billion dollars worth of investments. Specifically, it's the innovator's dilemma, right? If your production line has orders up to 10 years, what actually motivates you financially to take a risk on this bold new idea that can revolutionize, of course, air travel and the movement of goods? But again, what you have down there in the shop is already working.
Right, right. And you've invested so much time and potentially IP. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, I suppose. But obviously, there are advantages to rethinking an aircraft design. So, what was it about this blended wing body that made you think that it was worth pursuing as a startup?
Well, the running joke in the aviation industry is never start an airplane company. I think I've already broken that, and here we are 7 years later. But I think the idea is, investors always ask you why now? Why has the technology gotten better? What is the right opportunity today that makes it viable versus, say 30 years ago when it was looked at? I think air freight in general and kind of the story that we have as a company weaved into where we are politically as well as, in the market dynamics and of course sustainability in the airline side has created a very unique, what we call a once in a generational opportunity to really go after what could be another Boeing or Airbus lookalike. I think specifically the story goes is in 1996, Amazon came into online And for the first time ever, people started to really think about buying packages over the internet. And of course, to move those packages, we started out with, the United States Postal Service, which involved ensuring the ground infrastructure. But where we are today with the Amazon 2-day Prime service kind of created a trigger point in air freight in particular, to really the movement of e-commerce goods over air. And the one thing about Amazon packages, if you open one over the last 24 hours, they're halfway filled with air. And so traditional airplanes, like the tubes and the wings, are cubing out on volume before they top out on weight. And so what the industry is really looking for is a more sustainable volumetric airplane. Of course, the blended wing body fits just that.
Yeah, because you've got a lot more space because the body's just larger, right? So you have more space to work with.
Yeah, and it's actually, in its baseline geometry, it's really the triangular shape. As you move further down, into the triangle, the space gets more and more wider and larger. And so that kind of makes sense for a lot of rectangular boxes.
I mentioned in the opening that you are aiming to cut emissions by up to 50% compared to existing airframe designs. Is that purely because it's just got better aerodynamics, or what else is going on here that makes you think you can hit that number?
So, as an aerodynamicist, if somebody ever told me that I'm able to reduce drag by 50%, I would, call bullshit right away. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
nothing like that has ever been in the aviation sector for a very long time. 30% is you're kind of on the teetering edge there. But what's really unique about it is, we talked about the fuselage, of course, behaving more like a wing, which is less drag. So that's the 30%. But the other 20% comes from the fact that we can actually just carry more goods or people. And so because we are so volume centric, designed around these low density packages, and of course humans themselves are actually low density with the amount of space that we require, we're actually able to carry this 40% more revenue cargo or people for the same flight. So when you boil the equation down to per person per trip, that's where you get the 50%.
So it's less of a physical reduction in emissions and more of a emissions per payload, if you will.
Per payload. Yeah, and that's really how the airlines really measure it too. I mean, it's one thing to send an airplane, for a certain trip, but usually tied to per seat passenger, per kilo, or per pound of cargo being transported. And so that's really the unit metric that people watch.
And so that's also where you're getting to this 60% reduced costs number as well.
Of course, because now we're carrying more cargo and we're doing more efficiently aerodynamically, then we're able to reduce per pound of cargo on our smaller product about a 3x reduction in the movement of payload. And on the passenger side, with our second product, about a 2x reduction.
In terms of emissions, just from the physical emissions, are you putting out the same amount of emissions as a standard aircraft might, or is it more or is it less?
It'll be less. It'll be 30%. So tied to our 30% less fuel burn, the amount of emissions will be also 30% less.
Thank you. I appreciate you breaking all that down for us. We like to know where these numbers are coming from. So you've got these two airframe designs. It sounds like they're going to have different types of markets that they serve. So can you explain to me the different sizes? What's the design thinking between the two of these?
The design thinking is the company's DNA was specifically in air freight. So the first product, what we're calling the Kona Regional Freighter, is really destined to do just that, is connect smaller regional airports to larger hubs. A good example might be, from Eugene, Oregon to Oakland, California for the FedEx nightly sorts. In Canada, a lot of our customers will be using our airplanes to connect smaller communities, indigenous communities, which are really populated, to the larger metropolitan areas down south is a good example. So freight only on that one. And then the second product is an expansion into that. Essentially, we had a really large major airline approach us and kind of start thinking about how to adapt some of our freighter technology into the passenger sector. Freight and passengers, actually, there's a lot of similarities in it, specifically e-commerce. And so the second product is meant for the narrow body market, specifically the 200 passenger category, which is single aisle, as they call it within the industry. But, think about the airplanes you take from New York to LA, Boston over into London, even as an example. So about 4,100 nautical miles, but think about a single aisle.
How do you think people might reimagine the interior layout of a passenger plane if you've got all this space to work with?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to watch, especially, we have relationships with most major airlines across the world. And obviously, once we get through the unit economics, the sustainability play, everybody gets excited. And the next question is, show us the interior. And so we show this really beautiful cavernous interior. And then the next question is, how many more seats can we put inside of it? But I think there's definitely opportunities. We've been throwing around some concepts of things. A lot of us have kids, but like a play area out back, where you can kind of silo the kids into a pen. That'll be good. But then, of course, somebody pointed out seatbelts and kids usually don't mix. And so, how do you actually seatbelt kids in a play area?
Oh yeah, I can see them attached to harnesses that are like moving around in a cable situation.
Yeah, so that was not a good play really early on. So we've kind of went back to like a business center, vending machines for economy, also like a train configuration where it's a club seating, so it's two facing two, so you have like families possibly sitting together now. So there's a lot of opportunities yet to be had, but again, we're not the ones that are choosing the interiors. It's really going to be up to the airlines and how they choose to outfit them.
I like that you are offering the airlines the opportunity to rethink how we move people around in an airplane. I think that, we all have felt a little bit like glorified sardines in these airplanes and would like a little bit more room. But of course, the air that is going to cost money if an airline can't sell more seats. But I think to make the flying experience more enjoyable, you know, over time we've seen airlines that do focus on the passenger experience and make it more enjoyable tend to be more successful than those that just focus on the economics. So it seems like there's a balance that can be had. And I think there's more potential with this larger space to, like you said, provide some additional amenities for folks so that, especially with families facing each other and things like this, maybe so it could feel like more like you're on a train than on a plane.
Yeah, exactly right. And we did put one Easter egg in the design that still has not been broken. So specifically, the width of the cabin is enough to fit 12 economy seats out back, but with more elbow room. And you can't just put one more seat inside. So you kind of have to live with it. So at the very least, I've done my little part to making it less terrible to travel with more elbow room.
You've had a lot of success already. You mentioned that you've got partnerships with a lot of the major players in this industry. So tell me a little bit about the business side of things. How many pre-orders do you have? Who are some of your early partners that you're really excited about?
So on the freighter side, there's still a lot more announcements that we can't make, unfortunately. But the order book sits at about $16 billion today, over 580 airplanes on order, which is really exciting. Not a lot of young startups can say that, which, of course, proves that we're in the right track here, even though we're, taking on a behemoth of an industry to make it essentially move into the future. So the majority of the order book values with the larger airplanes, but the majority of order numbers of the aircraft are actually with the smaller aircraft for freight delivery. And I think our customers, of course, are really excited about the story of starting out with freight, normalizing the configuration, the technology, and of course, then stepping that up into the larger airplane, de-risking the safety and the business aspects of the company as well.
I've always thought that with these new propulsion solutions, the first opportunity to go after is cargo and freight. There's lower risk to human life that way. Speaking of humans on these planes, you're working also on autonomous capabilities for your cargo aircraft. So tell me a little bit about what are some of the challenges that come from creating an autonomous aircraft design? Like we already have autopilot, right, on airplanes. So what else do you have to do to create a fully autonomous experience?
So not a lot of people know, but first flight of an airplane was here in the United States in 1903. First autopilot system inside the airplane was 1913. So we've been flying with autonomous or autopilot-like systems for over 100 and 20 odd some years now. And of course, the running joke is the pilots never even touch the stick right now, and so they're glorified taxi drivers. Of course, I have a lot of pilot friends, and I'll get a bunch of phone calls after this. But the pilot there is really more of a safety mechanism. is the way you think about it. So when things do go wrong, how does the pilot address the issues? And of course, having that pilot in the cockpit is really that safety feature that we all as humans want and understand, that somebody capable is, tackling these hard problems which are changing in nuance. So the question of autonomy is really a question about safety, and how do you replicate a lot of those human being type of safety systems when you take the pilot out of the cockpit.
So I've been on a few private jets, and I remember listening to the conversation that was happening with the pilot and the co-pilot. And a lot of it was just like they're getting a signal from a tower and they're being told to change their trajectory. So a lot of that, I would assume, would be handled through the autonomous features. And I don't know anything about autopilot on these big commercial airplanes. Does the autopilot in a commercial plane just automatically make that adjustment when it gets a signal from the tower, or do the humans have to still do that?
So the way it works right now, just to simplify it, is there's a route planned already that's pre-filed with air traffic control that the pilot's already inputted. And so really for the autopilot, it's an execution of that route planning tool. As soon as the airplane reaches a certain waypoint, tower might say, confirm to move to this type of altitude and airspeed and heading. Then the pilot would essentially re-engage the next waypoint, and the autopilot will then maneuver the airplane towards the next waypoint. So the pilots are essentially guiding the airplane through the national airspace system. But the voice part of it, of course, is really key. And so right now there's a huge, I would say, overhaul in air traffic control, or ATC, to really move into a text-based system. And so as soon as we do that, I think that's almost an enabling feature for full autonomous aircraft to actually apply to the national airspace system without the need for voice. There's a huge caveat. We actually already have fully autonomous aircraft flying through the national airspace systems that not a lot of people know about.
Oh, yeah. What are those? Tell me.
I mean, a lot of unmanned capability has been developed and grown within the military sectors, and of course for surveillance and things like that. You have a lot more things flying overhead than most people understand.
But we think of drones as being controlled by somebody at some place, which is different than full autonomy. How do you design for this? How do you move from one to the other?
The way that the FAA has essentially set it up is the word drone is really meant for the smaller. What would you buy at, what used to be Toys R Us? I can't believe that that place is gone. But, those types of toys or amateur types of flying machines, those are drones. When you move into the larger aircraft, kind of like where we are, even with the first product, which is about 19,000 pounds, where remotely piloted aircraft system is the way that they, really think about us. So we certify and we operate exactly as a large airplane, but we're remotely guided through the national airspace system with a remote pilot is the way that they would like to think about it.
Is that really different than a drone that's like being guided by a remote pilot? It's just smaller. Is it just the size that's different?
A drone, like who knows how the heck it's made? It could be made with paper clips. But the moment you say the word aircraft, so remotely piloted aircraft system, we go through FAA certification. Somebody bent the wing. There's structural design over it. Somebody checked the aerodynamics, and so we have like a mountain of paperwork that comes with, the word aircraft, and the drone usually does not. That's usually a receipt.
But like the military has drones and things. So, but I guess there's more sophistication around something that you would term an aircraft versus a drone in terms of its capabilities and systems, which I can appreciate. So you mentioned paperwork and regulatory filings. So let's talk about the regulatory path. Where are you right now? And where do you need to go?
So we have a really good relationship with the FAA. Not a lot of people know, but the FAA, the way it operates, is under like different jurisdictions. So it's actually based where the company is located. And so here in San Diego, we're actually under the jurisdiction of the Los Angeles Aircraft Certification Office. So that's our point of contact. And then there's different geographical locations too, like Atlanta, Georgia, Wichita, Seattle, of course, for the one of the big ones and the like. So the way that we're looking at it is, first of all, there's an experimental aircraft. So essentially, we build an airplane for company testing and research and development purposes. We already have FAA approval to go test here in San Diego, which is really exciting, at a brown field. And shortly after that, we build the airplane, fly it for a couple of hours, and let's just say we're comfortable with the data that we've started to receive. And then we start applying for something called a type certificate. And so a type certificate is needed to essentially certify the airplane for safety systems that are in line with the Code of Federal Regulations. And it takes about 2,000 flight hours for us to complete the data to do that.
And you start collecting those flight hours and all that data after you file all your paperwork. So you can't count flight hours prior to that point, correct?
The delineation within the airplane world is if we say that this airplane is the configuration that we want to certify, then the FAA says, okay, this is the airplane. Don't change anything then. So going now on forward, then if we all agree that this is the airplane, you can take credit for the flight hours. And that, of course, comes with a bunch of paperwork.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's always good amount of paperwork in this kind of stuff. So what is the timeline right now for your blended wing aircraft design to be certified? Like, when can we expect these to be actually flying commercially?
So I'm going to use the word hope, being a startup, of course, and projecting timelines. So we hope to have the first airplane up in the air in about 24 to 36 months here in San Diego, and about 18 months for certification. For the second product, the passenger one that really gets me excited, we're predicting early market entry in early 2030s for that one.
Okay, so for both, it's somewhere towards the end of the decade that we'll start seeing this 2028, 29, 30, sometime around there.
Yeah, exactly. Probably not a lot of people will see the cargo variant, but just because of kind of where they live. But definitely for the passenger one, it'll be a big shock, I think, when it enters the market.
Yeah, cool. Because do you think a lot of these cargo planes, they fly at night a lot, right? Too, so you don't even see them out there.
They fly only twice a day for regional flights. So for you to actually spot one is really rare. But they run like a clockwork. Actually, coming home from the office here, there's one that flies at exactly like 5:07 it lands. And so I know exactly what time it is if I spot it on the way home.
Yeah, there you go. And I'm sure, like with Amazon and all these other next day delivery solutions coming all over the world, not just Amazon, the whole market for air cargo just seems to be expanding globally. And we're using traditional aircraft design because that's what we had to use. So it sounds to me like you're designing something for a new era of commerce, that people have been satisfied to just use existing technology and handle the inherent inefficiencies.
Absolutely. As one of our really close advisors, he was the founding partner of Emirates Airways. He told me the 747 was designed with cargo in mind, and it makes for a damn good passenger airplane. So there's something to be said about cargo first, and then taking advantage of it for the rest of us.
Thank you so much, Aleksey, for being on the show. This is really fascinating. Earthlings, go to our show notes if you're listening to this episode and check out some of the pictures that we're going to post there, some video of these aircraft, and be on the lookout. You might have to stay up in the middle of the night to see one. And even then, you might only just see the little lights blinking. You probably not even be able to tell that it's one of these aircraft, but it'll be out there shuffling your packages around on this beautiful blue-green space flower that we call home. Primary financial and production support for Earthlings 2.0 comes from Technica Communications, an award-winning PR firm amplifying breakthrough technologies of the future. Additional supporters include Greenlane, who is working to build a nationwide network of commercial EV charging infrastructure, Tigo Energy, a solar energy and software solutions provider focusing on commercial, industrial, and residential solar installations, Ampion, who is expanding renewable energy access for communities and Fortune 500 companies everywhere through community solar. 24/7 Solar, a next-generation concentrated solar power solution that's modular and can capture the sun's energy at a higher temperature than conventional CSP and store it in simple ceramic pellets. And the U.S. Biochar Initiative, who is increasing production and use of biochar in North America by developing markets, increasing awareness, and building community. And of course, our heartfelt gratitude goes out to you, our listeners, for your curiosity and dedication and showing up with us every week. Thank you so much. We do this for you. If you have a topic you'd like us to cover, or if you want to participate in our Pay It Forward guest model, please contact me at LisaAnn@earthlingspodcast.com. And you can search our entire archive on any podcast app as well as YouTube. And you can also go to earthlingspodcast.com and search our website there. Until next time, keep exploring and caring for this beautiful blue-green space flower that we call home.